Good morning, Year 4. Here is your next instalment of The Witches. I know you've read a few chapters by now and you've listened to Mrs. Blues and Mrs. Cross, but I am going to read you chapter 7 and chapter 8 today. I hope you enjoy. This first chapter, chapter 7, is called Frazzled Like a Fritter. Okay. All the women, or rather the witches, were now sitting motionlessly in their chairs and staring as though hypnotized at somebody who had suddenly appeared on the platform. That somebody was another woman. The first thing I noticed about this woman was her size. She was tiny, probably no more than 4.5 feet tall. She looked quite young, I guessed about 25 or 26, and she was very pretty. She had on a rather long, stylish black dress that reached right to the ground, and she wore black gloves that came up to her elbows. Unlike the others, she wasn't wearing a hat. She didn't look to me like a witch at all, but she couldn't possibly not be one. Otherwise, what on earth was she doing up there on the platform? And why, for heaven's sake, were all the other witches gazing at her with such a mixture of adoration, awe, and fear? Very slowly, the young lady on the platform raised her hands to her face. I saw her gloved fingers unhook something behind her ears. And then she caught hold of her cheeks and lifted her face clean away. The whole of that pretty face came away in her hands. It was a mask. As she took off the mask, she turned sideways and placed it carefully upon a small table nearby. And when she turned around again and faced us, I very nearly screamed out loud. That face of hers was the most frightful and frightening thing I've ever seen. Just looking at it gave me the shakes all over. It was so crumpled and wizened and shrunken and shriveled. It looked as though it had been pickled by vinegar. It was a fearsome and ghastly sight. There was something terribly wrong with it, something foul and putrid and decayed. It seemed quite literally to be rotting away at the edges. And in the middle of her face, around the mouth and cheeks, I could see the skin all cankered and worm-eaten as though maggots were working away in there. There are times when something is so frightful you become mesmerized by it and can't look away. I was like that now. I was transfixed. I was numbed. I was magnetized by the sheer horror of this woman's features. But there was more to it than that. There was a look of serpents in those eyes of hers, and they flashed around the audience. I knew immediately, of course, that this was none other than the Grand High Witch herself. I knew also why she'd worn a mask. She could never have moved around in public, let alone book in at a hotel with her real face. Everyone who saw her would have run away screaming. The doors! Shouted the Grand High Witch in a voice that filled the room and bounced around the walls. Are they chained and bolted? The doors are chained and bolted, your grandness, answered a voice in the auditorium. And there's that picture there. Worm-eaten, ghastly face. The brilliant snake's eyes that were set so deep in that dreadful, rotting, worm-eaten face glared unblinkingly at the witches who sat facing her. You may remove your gloves, she shouted. Her voice, I noticed, had the same hard metallic quality as the voice of the witch I'd met under the conker tree, only it was far louder and much harsher. It rasped, it grated, it snarled, it scraped, it shrieked, and it growled. Everyone in the room was peeling off their gloves. I was now watching the hands of those in the back row. I wanted very much to see what their fingers looked like and whether my grandmother had been right. Yes, I can see several of them now. I could see the brown claws curving over the tips of their fingers. They were about 2 inches long, those claws, and sharp at the ends. You may remove your shoes, barked the Grand High Witch. I heard a sigh of relief going up from all the witches in the room as they kicked off their narrow, high-heeled shoes, and then I got a glimpse under the chairs of several pairs of stockinged feet, square and completely toeless. Revolting they were, as though the toes had been sliced away from the feet with a carving knife. You may remove your wigs, snarled the Grand High Witch. She had a peculiar way of speaking. There was some sort of foreign accent there, something harsh, and she seemed to have trouble pronouncing the letter W. As well as this, she did something funny with the letter R. She would roll it round in her mouth like a piece of hot pot crackling before spitting it out. And just as I turn over, you can see there the fingernails and the toeless feet. Remove your wigs and get some fresh air into your spotty scalp, she shouted, and another sigh of relief arose from the audience as all the hands went up to their heads and all the wigs, with all the hats still on them, were lifted away. There now appeared in front of me, row upon row of bold female heads, a sea of naked scalps, every one of them red and itchy looking from being rubbed by the lining of the wigs. I simply cannot tell you how awful they were, and somehow the whole sight was made even more grotesque because underneath those frightfully scabby bald heads, the bodies were dressed in fashionable and rather pretty clothes. It was monstrous. It was unnatural. Oh heavens, I thought, oh help! Oh Lord, have mercy on me! These foul, bald-headed females are child killers, every one of them, and here I am imprisoned in the same room, and I can't escape. At that point, a new and doubly horrifying thought struck me. My grandmother had said that with their special nose holes, they could smell out a child on the pitch-black night from right across the other side of the road. Up to now, my grandmother had been right every time. It seemed a certainty, therefore, that one of the witches in the back row was going to sniff me out any moment, and then the yell of "dog's droppings" would go all around the room, and I'd be cornered like a rat. I knelt on the carpet behind the screen, hardly daring to breathe. Then, suddenly, I remembered another very important thing my grandmother had told me. The dirtier you are, she said, the harder it is for a witch to smell you out. How long had it been since I had a bath? Not for ages. I had my own room in the hotel, and my grandmother never bothered me with silly things like that. Come to think of it, I don't think I'd had a bath since we arrived. So again, the pictures at the top there, you can see all of their bold, scratchy, horrible heads. When did I last wash my feet or my hands or my face? Certainly not this morning, not yesterday either. I glanced down at my hands. They were covered with smudge and mud, and goodness knows what else besides. So perhaps I had a chance after all. The stinkwaves couldn't possibly get out through all that dirt. "Witches of England!" shouted the Grand High Witch. She herself, I noticed, had not taken off either her wig or her gloves or her shoes. "Witches of England!" she yelled. The audience stirred uneasily and sat up straighter in their chairs. "Miserable witches!" she yelled. "Useless lady witches! Feeble, flibbering witches! You are a heap of idle, good-for-nothing verms!" A shudder went through the audience. The Grand High Witch was clearly in an ugly mood, and they knew it. I had a feeling that something awful was going to happen soon. "I am having my breakfast this morning," cried the Grand High Witch, "and I am looking out of the window at the beach, and what am I seeing? I am asking you, what am I seeing? I am seeing a revolting sight. I am seeing hundreds, and I am seeing thousands of rotten, repulsive little children playing on the sand. It is putting me right off my food. Why have you not got rid of them?" she screamed. "Why have you not rubbed them all out, these filthy, smelly children?" With each word she spoke, flecks of pale blue phlegm shot from her mouth like little bullets. "I am asking you why!" she screamed. Nobody answered her question. "Children smell!" she screamed. "They stink out the world! We do not want these children around here." The bold heads in the audience all nodded vigorously. "One child a week is no good to me," the Grand High Witch cried out. "Is that the best you can do?" "We will do better," murmured the audience. We will do much better." "Better is no good either," screeched the Grand High Witch. I demand maximum results. So, here are my orders. My orders are that every single child in the country shall be rubbed out, squashed, squirted and frittered before I come here again in 1 year's time. Do I make myself clear? A great gasp went up from the audience. I saw the witches all looking at one another with deeply troubled expressions, and I heard one witch at the end of the front row saying aloud, "All of them? We can't possibly wipe out all of them." The Grand High Witch whipped round as though someone had stuck a skewer up into her bottom. "Who said that?" she snapped. "Who dares to argue with me? It was you, was it not?" She pointed a gloved finger, as sharp as a needle, at the witch who had spoken. I didn't mean it, your grandness," the witch cried out. I didn't mean to argue. I was just talking to myself." "You dared to argue with me?" screamed the Grand High Witch. I was just talking to myself," cried the wretched witch. I swear it, your grandness." She began to shake with fear as she said this. The Grand High Witch took a step forward, and when she spoke again, it was in a voice that made my blood run cold. "A stupid witch who answers back must burn until her bones are black," she screamed. No, begged the witch in the front row. The Grand High Witch went on. "A foolish witch without a brain must sizzle in a fiery flame." "Save me," cried the wretched witch in the front row. The Grand High Witch took no notice of her. She spoke again. "An idiotic witch like you must roast upon the barbecue." Forgive me, oh your grandness," cried the miserable culprit. "I didn't mean it." But the Grand High Witch continued with her terrible recital. "A witch who dares to say I'm wrong will not be with us very long." A moment later, a stream of sparks that looked like tiny white hot metal filled came shooting out of the Grand High Witch's eyes and flew straight across at the one who dared to speak. I saw the sparks striking against her and burrowing into her, and she screamed a horrible, howling scream, and a puff of smoke rose up from around her. A smell of burning meat filled the room. Nobody moved. And you can see the picture there of the Grand High Witch with that laser beam coming out from her eyes. Nobody moved. Like me, they were all watching the smoke, and when it had cleared away, the chair was empty. I caught a glimpse of something wispy white, like a little cloud, fluttering upwards and disappearing out of the window. A great sigh rose from the audience. The Grand High Witch glared around the room. "I hope nobody else is going to make me cross today," she remarked. There was a deadly silence. "Frizzled like a fritter," said the Grand High Witch. "Cooked like a carrot. You will never see her again. Now we get down to business." That was chapter 7. Chapter 8, Formula 86, Delayed Action Mouse Maker. "Children are revolting," screamed the Grand High Witch. "We will wipe them all away. We will scrub them off the face of the earth. We will flush them down the drain." Yes, chanted the audience. "Wipe them away, scrub them off the earth, flush them down the drain." "Children are foul and filthy," thundered the Grand High Witch. They are, chorused the English witches. "They are foul and filthy." "Children are dirty and stinky," screamed the Grand High Witch. "Dirty and stinky," cried the audience, getting more and more worked up. "Children are smelling of dogs' droppings," screeched the Grand High Witch. "Pooh!" cried the audience. "Pooh, pooh, pooh!" "They are worse than dogs' droppings," screeched the Grand High Witch. "Dogs' droppings is smelling like violets and primroses compared with children." "Violets and primroses," shouted the audience. They were clapping and cheering almost every word spoken from the platform. The speaker seemed to have them completely under her spell. To talk about children is making me sick, screamed the Grand High Witch. I am feeling sick, even thinking about them. Fetch me a basin. The Grand High Witch paused and glared at the mass of eager faces in the audience. They waited, wanting more. So now, barked the Grand High Witch, so now I am having a plan. I am having a giganticus plan for getting rid of every single child in the whole of Inkland. The witches gasped. They gaped. They turned and gave each other ghoulish grins of excitement. Yes, thundered the Grand High Witch. We shall swish them and swallow them, and we shall make them disappear, every single smelly little brat in Inkland, in one stroke. Woohoo! Cried the witches, clapping their hands. You're brilliant, Her Grandness. You're fantabulous. Shut up and listen, snapped the Grand High Witch. Listen very carefully and let us not be having any muck-ups. The audience leaned forward, eager to learn how this magic was going to be performed. Each and every one of you, thundered the Grand High Witch, is going to go back to your hometowns immediately and resign from your jobs. Resign, give notice, retire. We will, they cried. We'll resign from our jobs. And after you have resigned from your jobs, the Grand High Witch went on, each and every one of you will be going and buying. She paused. What will we be buying? They cried. Tell us, O brilliant one. What shall we be buying? Sweet shops, cried the Grand High Witch. Sweet shops, they cried. We're going to buy sweet shops. What a French as we! Each of you will be buying for herself a sweet shop. You will be buying the very best and most respectable sweet shop in Inkland. We will, they answered. Their dreadful voices were like a chorus of dentists drilling, all grinding away together. I am wanting no tuppence, crummy little tobacco-selling newspaper sweet shops, shouted the Grand High Witch. I am wanting you to get only the very best sweet shops, filled up with high piles of luxurious, luscious sweets and tasty chocks. The best, they cried. We shall buy the best sweet shops in town. You will be having no trouble in getting what you want, shouted the Grand High Witch, because you will be offering 4 times as much as the shop is worth, and nobody is refusing an offer like that. Money is no problem to us witches, as you very well know. I have brought with me 6 trunks stuffed full with English banknotes, all new and crisp. And all of them, she added with a fiendish leer, all of them homemade. The witches in the audience grinned, appreciating this joke. At that point, one foolish witch got so excited at the possibility presented by owning a sweet shop that she leapt to her feet and shouted, the children will come flocking to my shop, and I will feed them poisoned sweets and poisoned chocks and wipe them out like weasels. The room became suddenly silent. I saw the tiny body of the Grand High Witch stiffen and then rigid with rage. Who spoke? She shrieked. It was you over there. The culprit sat down fast and covered her face with her claws. You blithering blumpkin, screeched the Grand High Witch. You brainless bog bumper! Are you not realizing that if you are going around poisoning little children, you will be caught in 5 minutes flat? Never in my life am I hearing such a blush-volloping suggestion coming from a bitch. The entire audience cowered and shook. I'm quite sure they all thought, as I did, that the terrible white-hot sparks were going to start flying again. Curiously enough, though, they didn't. If such a tongue-fiddling idea is all of you can be coming up with, thundered the Grand High Witch, then it is no wonder England is still swarming with rotten little children. There was another silence. The Grand High Witch glared at the witches in the audience. Do you not know, she shouted at them, that we witches are working only with magic? We know, your grandness, they all answered. Of course we know. The Grand High Witch grated her bony gloved hands against each other and cried out, "So each one of you is owning a magnificent sweet shop. The next move is that each of you will be announcing in the window of your sweet shop on a certain day you will be having a great gala opening with free sweets and chocolates to every child." "That will bring them in, the greedy little brutes," cried the audience. "They'll be fighting to get through the doors." "Next," continued the Grand High Witch, "you will prepare yourselves for this great gala opening by filling every last choc and every sweet in your shop with my very latest and greatest magical formula. This is known as Formula 86 Delayed Action Mouse Maker." "Delayed Action Mouse Maker," they chanted. "She's done it again. Her grandness has concocted yet another one of her wondrous magic child killers. How'd you make it, oh brilliant one?" "Exercise patience," answered the Great High Witch. "First, I am explaining to you how my Formula 86 Delayed Action Mouse Maker is working. Listen carefully." "We're listening," cried the audience, who were now jumping up and down in their chairs with excitement. "Delayed Action Mouse Maker is a green liquid," explained the Grand High Witch, "and one droplet in each choc or sweet will be quite enough. So here is what happens. Child eats choc, which has it in delayed action mouse maker liquid. Child goes home feeling fine. Child goes to bed still feeling fine. Child wakes up in the morning okay. Child goes to school still feeling fine. Formula, you understand, is delayed action and is not working yet." "We understand, oh brainy one," cried the audience. "But when does it start working?" "It starts to work at exactly 9 o'clock when the child is arriving at school," shouted the Grand High Witch triumphantly. "Child arrives at school. Delayed action mouse maker immediately starts to work. Child starts to shrink. Child is starting to grow fur. Child is starting to grow tail. All is happening in precisely 26 seconds. After 26 seconds, child is no longer a child. Child is a mouse." "A mouse!" cried the witches. "What a frumpious thought!" "Classrooms will be storming with mice," shouted the Grand High Witch. "Chaos and pandemonium will be raging in every school in England. Teachers will be hopping up and down. Women teachers will be standing on desks and holding up skirts and yelling, 'Help, help, help!'" They will," cried the audience. "And what," shouted the Grand High Witch, "is happening next in every school?" "Tell us," they cried, "tell us, oh brainy one." The Grand High Witch stretched her stringy neck forward and grinned at the audience, showing 2 rows of pointed teeth, slightly blue. She raised her voice louder than ever and shouted, "Mousetraps is coming out!" "Mousetraps!" cried the witches. "And cheese!" "Teachers is rushing and running around getting mousetraps and baiting them with cheese and putting them down all over school. Mice is nibbling cheese. Mousetraps is going off. All of school, mousetraps is going snappity-snap and mouse heads is rolling across the floors like marbles. All over England, in every school in England, noise of snapping mousetraps will be heard." At this point, the disgusting old Grand High Witch began to sort of do a witch's dance up and down on the platform, stamping her feet and clapping her hands. The entire audience joined in the clapping and the foot stamping. They were making such a tremendous racket that I thought surely Mr. Stringer would hear it and come banging at the door. But he didn't. Then, above all the noise, I heard the voice of the Grand High Witch screaming out some sort of an awful gloating song. "Down with children, do them in, boil their bones and fry their skin. Bish them, squish them, bash them, mash them, break them, shake them, slash them, smash them. Offer chocs with magic powder. Say eat up and say it louder. Cram them full of stinky eats.
Send them home still guzzling sweets. And in the morning, little fools, go marching off to separate schools. A girl feels sick and goes all pale. She yells, "Hey, look, I've grown a tail." A boy who's standing next to her screams, "Help, I think I'm growing fur." Another shouts, "We look like freaks. There's whiskers growing on our cheeks." A boy was a boy who was extremely tall cries out, "What's wrong? I'm growing small." 4 tiny legs begin to sprout from everybody round about. And all at once, all in thrice, there are no children, only mice. In every school is mice galore, all running round the schoolroom floor. And all the poor demented teachers is yelling, "Hey, who are these creatures?" They stand upon their desks and shout, "Get out, you filthy mice, get out!" Will someone fetch mouse traps, please? And don't forget to bring the cheese. Now mouse traps come, and every trap goes snip and snap and snippety snap. The mouse traps have a powerful spring. The springs go crack and snap and ping. Is lovely noise for us to hear, is music to a witch's ear. Dead mice is every place around, piled 2 feet deep upon the ground. With teachers searching left and right, but not a single child in sight. The teachers cry, "What's going on? Oh, where have all the children gone?" It's 9:30, and as a rule, they're never late as this for school. Poor teachers don't know what to do. Some sit and read, and just a few amuse themselves throughout the day by sweeping all the mouths away. And all us witches shout hooray. Okay, that is the end of our 2 chapters today. I hope you enjoyed them. I tried to do the accents as the V's and the W's came up and things like that. So I hope you enjoyed that. And I hope you enjoy the next 2 paragraphs that will be read either by Mrs. Cross or Mrs. Plews next. I'm not quite sure. And I will be back to do another couple of chapters soon. Thanks and see you soon.